And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll introduce our next guest right now, Dr. Michael Visser. So, Michael, you are going to be talking about a fascinating subject. It's always fascinated me, and I know that as a doctor, you have probably had a lot of contact with other people in the medical profession who may think you are steering them in a strange direction. So tell us, as a doctor, and moving into the area of near-death experiences, how did that happen?
Okay, well, first of all, I had my own personal experiences, and from a very young age, I was aware of a different level of consciousness than just the consciousness we have through our brain. Talking about the medical profession, that is probably the last profession that will jump on board and acknowledge there is such a thing as an alternative consciousness.
Right.
That being said, one of my, I'm originally from the Netherlands, so a cardiologist from the Netherlands, his name is Pim van Lommel. He actually did prospective research, so I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with academics, but most research is done by looking back, whereas prospective, you set up the model according to all the rules and regulations that there are to make it valid, which he did. And for 20 years he studied people that underwent cardiac surgery. He's a cardiologist, and in his research it's become blatantly evident that these experiences that people have, coined near-death experience, are actually true. Right.
So there we are. So, I mean, near-death experiences are being acknowledged by more and more people lately. I think a lot of them have felt a little embarrassed to say, oh, I had this terrible experience. Was I dreaming?
So that is one of the challenges that near-death experiences encounter. There's a true fear that people will think they're nuts and have lost their marbles. So a lot of them feel very passionate about it, want to share their experience, but at the same time they have this fear like, oh my God. Yeah.
And you have founded your own NDE, near-death experience. We refer to it as an NDE. You've founded your own network.
Correct, yes. So the idea behind that is that near-death experiences, if they have a safe place where they can network with each other, join groups and stuff like that, without that being, common knowledge, and they feel safe, that then provides the environment where they can come up and tell their stories and share the stories of other people with the similar experience.
Oh, that's wonderful, wonderful. All right, everybody, please acknowledge with a nice round of applause our next guest, Dr. Michael Visser and NDEs.
Thanks. All right, I can see here what you can see. There we go. So first of all, I want to briefly touch on what is called the confirmation bias. I'm not sure if you heard of biases and heuristics, but they're shortcuts that all of us have in our minds to quickly come to conclusions and decisions. So have you ever noticed we tend to seek out information that supports what we already believe, while ignoring that challenges our views. So this is called a confirmation bias. So we're going to talk about near-death experiences, and it's a serious affair. So although I might stand here smiling, do know that, number one, this presentation, I've uploaded it online. In the booth B1, I've got a QR code. You can scan that and then sign up to my free information page, and this whole presentation will be on there, so you can look at that when it's right for you in your own time and when your mind feels right to read through that. So I wanted to mention that. Let me see and not waste too much time. Oh, there's a blank spot here. All right. So through history, countless individuals who have had near-death experiences share a profound and consistent revelation. We are not our bodies, and death is not the end. So that's quite a big bomb to make a statement like that, but I'm making that statement because that's the essence of near-death experiences. So neuroscientists have studied the human mind and have come to a very clear and now widely accepted conclusion that there is no single human being that ever perceives the truth. If you don't perceive the truth or reality, then it's called an illusion. So our entire reality, as we experience that even now, is an illusion that we make up in our minds. So the other really important point that comes out of psychology and neuroscience is that our brains, when we're born, are completely blank. And we need to train our brains to synthesize perceptions and make an understanding of it so we can navigate through this world of space and time. So when you're newly born, you cannot even see. It takes your brain 3 months to be able to take electromagnetic energy that comes into your eyes and then is channeled into your brain, and then learn how to make an image out of that, and another 10 months before you can see in color, right? So then after that, you learn how to associate that. Like, as a baby, you point at this, and your mum or your dad say that's a sweater or a jumper, and then you start learning patterns. Anything that looks like that, you go jumper, sweater, and you get yes or no, and this is how you learn. So if you look at me, whether you like it or not, you will stereotype me from what is in your storage house in your brain. Go like, oh, he's a bloke, he's that, he has a weird accent, is he from South Africa? No, because I'm from the Netherlands, and on and on and on and on. Okay, so the big thing to realize is that we are not our bodies, and death is not the end. And I'll come back to that later. We actually have 2 levels of consciousness. So there is no death of your authentic self. You are not a body. And of course, your body is terminal, but your true self is not. So in this presentation, I'm going to explore the idea that your true essence is not confined to the body, hence, and it's something far greater. It's eternal, boundless, and it's interconnected with all of existence. Okay, so we're going to reflect on the accounts of those who have glimpsed beyond physical reality. There is millions and millions and millions of accounts similar to this, but I thought I'd pick this little excerpt of you to introduce you to a near-death experience. So consider this: if you're not just your body, what does that mean for how you live your life? So you just saw what happened to this particular man. So his brain was clinically dead, and he entered this whole different level of consciousness, and that's what happens. So I thought that's much more convincing than me saying you experience universal love and you feel connected with everything that is, because that's just a statement that you've left your brain before you leave my session. Okay, so I'm going to now very quickly go through 11 different scientists who are at the top of their field, who've all seen that we need to change our science from just being materialistic and start including all of this, what is called paranormal experiences. So I put here a bold new vision for the humanities, and there's a professor called Dr. Kripal, and he envisions a future where all of these experiences are not dismissed and they're accepted as the truth. And he says we need to go beyond materialism and reclaim the full human. So I'm not going to talk you through all of that. Like I said, if you want to read all of this, I've got it online. But basically he said, we're not just conditioned, we're also transcendent beings with transcendent experiences that prove to be way more valuable and important than all of the experiences we have on planet Earth. So here he is. I just took a minute or something.
Look, the reason God has to die is that so superhumans can live. We have to stop projecting our own divinity and our own immortality outside of ourselves. And this is what Nietzsche was objecting to. He objected to religion not because of its extreme claims. He was saying something much more extreme, much more outrageous, frankly. He objected to religion because it made people weak.
Kripal convincingly shows in his book that many of the foundational thinkers in the humanities, like Nietzsche, Jacques Derrida, Schopenhauer, or William James, had a very open mind when it comes to metaphysics, to ontology, and that they arrived at many of their important ideas not only through scientific reasoning.
Some of the most significant individuals in the history of humanities came to their ideas through altered states. We make the mistake of thinking these people thought their way to these ideas. They did not think their way to these ideas. We have to take seriously these ideas as coming from outside the individual.
So this professor is at the top of his game in the world on humanities, and this is what he's now putting forward. And I was just speaking at lunchtime with an individual who said he tried really, really hard to come into that transcendent experience, and then we both concluded the harder you try, the less likely you're going to succeed, because you really need to jolt out of your brain-directed consciousness and shift to this transcendent consciousness. So he is a second academic. His name is Dr. Kelly, and he's a pioneer in experimental psychology. So experimental psychology concerns itself with what's called psi phenomena, near-death experiences, and basically consciousness beyond the body. So here he is, and let's see what he has to say.
Shown. Is consciousness a byproduct of brain activity, or the mind is primary to matter? And is there reliable evidence that led you to your conclusions?
Well, I mean, I have no idea who we're talking to here or what they might know about parapsychology. But I would say simply to summarize that whole dimension of the subject, that in the past 150 or so years, enough evidence has accumulated from case and field studies, plus a couple of thousand experimental studies, to convince any reasonably open-minded person who takes the trouble to study it that these phenomena exist as facts of nature, period, and that our science will have to expand in some way that permits it to accommodate them. And I think you can take that to the bank.
Okay, so although lots of near-death experience things, people will think that I'm a lunatic when I express my experience, but we see now in the top of science, that's all changed. These are really top scientists, professor, doctors, who all say the same thing. You cannot ignore the evidence that these are true experiences. So this third one is Dr. Alex Gómez Marin. He's Spanish, and he has proven that in particular, he's doing studies with blind people, and they get a blindfold on, and then in the next room they have an envelope with different objects, and they can tell exactly what object's being pulled. So they can actually see without their eyes working, and even remotely, they're not in the same room, and they can still identify what goes on. So I just wanted to show you. I think I have to go one more.
Can you give us an example from your particular research? What are you doing to study consciousness?
Yes.
How you do it?
Yes.
What results have you achieved? What questions have you answered?
All right. Okay. Okay. So I'm working with a blind man who can perceive images in the near surroundings. So this will be like a cousin of what's called remote viewing, this alleged ability. And you always need to say alleged because people say, no, it's not true, it's not proven. Well, there's a lot of evidence and very strong protocols as to how to do that. But so I'm studying a version of that can be called extraocular vision. Other people call it mind sight. Other people call it direct vision, intuitive vision. A Frenchman 100 years ago, Jules Romain, wrote a book. He called it the paroptic sense. Whatever it is the ability to perceive visual information without your eyes.
Okay. I don't know if you ever followed the Cold War stories, but in America they use psychic people who could spy on the KGB, sitting in Philadelphia, and then go to Moscow and be in that room and hear every word that's what's being said. And people thought that it was a bit far-fetched, but it's actually now proven in proper scientific research setting that some people have that psychic gift and they can totally do that, which just proves that consciousness can actually exist without your brain and all of your sensory organs, which is quite interesting. So the next person I want to show you is Federico Vagin. He is a very smart cookie. He constructed the first microprocessor, which was used in central processing units in computers. So he made computers possible, in other words. And he now has come to the conclusion that consciousness is the foundation of all reality. So even things like this podium I stand on, as a physicist, he's proven that the foundation of this material is actually pure consciousness and nothing else. So let's just see what he has to say.
Waiting for, go back to sleep, thinking nothing. And all of a sudden, out of the chest, just energy was coming out of my chest, but it was love. And it was love that was never felt before. It was love that was coming from me. How can love come from me? I mean, it was unthinkable that love could come from me. And it was 10,000 times more powerful than any love that I felt before. I mean, in fact, I never felt that love because it was unconditional love. Now I have a name for it. It was love, period. Yes, it was coming from me, but it was love. And it was light. It was a white light scintillating. It was, like sparkles, and it was coming out. And then it explodes and it's everywhere. But it's everywhere, but my consciousness is there too. So not only my consciousness is within me, but it's also outside of me. And all of a sudden I realize I am that. So I am the observer and the observed simultaneously. But I retain my point of view. And then I realize, oh my God, this stuff is the stuff of which everything is made. Everything comes from this stuff. And my body was hot, it was vibrating, like the cells of my body were resonating with this thing. Of course, the emotion, the feelings was love, joy, and peace. Because this stuff felt like, that's me. I'm at home. This is me. So I'm finally home. This is this is home. Mm-hmm. But so it was all mixed up.
What happens, for people to understand, what happens when we die? And they say
we don't go anywhere because we never were in the body. It's the body that dies. We don't die.
So this is where top physicists and scientists are at. A total conversion of materialistic points of view. So next is Dr. Bernardo Kastrup, who said the universe is not made of things and objects, it's made of experience, and experience, of course, you become aware of in pure consciousness. He also says consciousness is not generated by the brain, and it's the fundament of all that is. So this is a very smart cookie. Worked for the CERN in Europe. I've just got a minute. He's very brainy.
People recognize family members and recognize themselves as individuals with an identity and a past. So this is a question about your whole notion of biological life and dissociation, and if there are other layers, I think, of dissociation, or if one directly returns to mind at large, so to speak.
Yeah. So the position I normally hold and talk about is that biology, life, is what the dissociation in this field of subjectivity that underlies all nature, that's what dissociation looks like. And that's why we seem to have a separate sense of identity, separate from the rest of nature, because life is what dissociation looks like. We are dissociated. And therefore, the end of life, death, is then the end of the dissociation. Yeah. And then there is no separate me anymore. We return to what we have always been, which is nature itself, that field of subjectivity.
So no, it was really, really short. But basically he believes like when we're in space-time, we live in a sense of separation, or he calls it disassociation. So as soon as your body dies, that leaves, and then you become one, well, he calls it nature, or call it the universe. It doesn't matter, it's just terminology. So this is very interesting. Also, this guy's very brainy, so I'll show you a minute, but if you can't understand what he's talking about, that's all right. His name is Michael Levin. And because I'm originally medically trained, he looked at how does a single fertilized human egg know how to divide and become all these different tissues, kidney cells, liver cells, brain cells, and all that kind of stuff. And particularly in cancers, what you see is like the cell loses its specialization, becomes back like a primordial cell, starts dividing and spreading out, of course metastasis and ruining other tissues. Really good question. And so what he discovered was that there is consciousness in your human body. It is not of the brain, it's not of the nervous system, doesn't have neurons, none of that. And he calls it the bioelectric glue, and it glues around cells, and it helps cells to communicate with each other and stay within their tissue, stay within as a liver cell, as a breast cell, as a kidney cell, or whatever organ you look at. And he's been researching this on tadpoles, where they induce cancers in tadpoles, and by influencing the bioelectric gel around the cancer cells, they can return cancer cells to normal functioning cells. Cancer is gone, no chemo needed, no radiation needed, no surgery needed. So it's an incredible progression in that sense. So let's just see what he has to say. Like I said, he's very brainy.
The reason I think this stuff is not these are not questions of philosophy. These are very practical questions of science because they lead to specific actionable technology. So the idea that what's going on in cancer is a shrinking of the cognitive light cone leads directly to a research program where you say, well, instead of killing these cells with toxic chemotherapies, because I believe that they're genetically irrevocably damaged, maybe what we can do is force them into better electrical networks with their neighbors, and that's exactly what we've done. And so we've had lots of success expressing strong human oncogenes in frog embryo cells, and then leaving the oncoproteins be, but instead making sure that they're connected into tight electrical networks with their neighbors, and they normalize. They make nice skin, nice muscle. They do their normal thing instead of being metastatic. And so that kind of thing, it's very important to me that all these ideas, and so we'll talk about in a minute about Platonic space and things like that. It's important to me that all of these ideas don't just remain as kind of philosophical musings, but they have to make contact with the real world, and specifically not just explaining stuff that was done before, but facilitating new advances. They have to enable new research programs that weren't possible before. That's what I think is the value of all of this kind of these deep philosophical discussions.
So in a nutshell, what it means that there's a lot of idea that DNA is what programs everything. In this slide is being debunked. So you can think of DNA as just a big storage shed where you have lots of shells, and you can find a code for cancer, you can find a code for a hormone, you can find a code for a neurotransmitter, which do all different things. But the way that's guided is actually comes from consciousness that is outside of your nervous system, outside your brain, and is not under that control. So it's incredible. So this is a female doctor, Marjorie Woolacott, the next little scientist I'm highlighting. And she's proven that consciousness is not dependent on neurons, on the nervous system, or anything like that. And she particularly links back to what's called Shaivism, which comes from the 9th to 10th century in Kashmir, which is up there high in India, close to the Himalayan mountains and all that. So let's just have a look at what she has to say.
I would say that there are just two more cases that I won't go into detail on, but they're also very strong. One is the case that I actually also published with Dr. Bettina Payton, who had cardiac arrest during a cesarean section for the birth of her third child. And once again, she had her eyes taped shut, and yet at a certain point, she, of course, hears the surgeon say, it's the anesthesiologist say her blood pressure is too low. How far along are you in the surgery, to the surgeon? And he basically says her blood pressure is plummeting fast. And at that point, she hears a loud expletive because, in fact, her blood pressure has plummeted. And they then go ahead and press that red button to call a code into the wall because her heart has stopped. And she then is watching all of this now from above her body in the operating room, seeing everything in the operating room. She then leaves for a period of time and goes, she says, she realizes it's not another realm, it's another state of consciousness that she is in, where she feels one with this sparkling like intelligence. And she feels totally happy there, but then is told, you have to go back. She goes back, enters the operating room, and sees the code team rushing into the room, trying to revive her. And then this white-haired surgeon coming in, weaving his way through the room to her side, taking his hand, reaching into her blood-filled abdomen, locating the aorta, clamping his finger around it, clamping it shut, and that's when her heart stops pumping again. And she knows that she's going to live because she's watching all of this happening. And she then, again, hears a nurse whisper in her ear that you have a baby that's a beautiful little girl, she survived. She wakes up in the recovery room later from the anesthesia, and before anybody can talk to her, even though she has a trachea tube in her mouth still, she motions for them to say nothing and for a napkin, and she writes on the napkin, I know my heart stopped. I know my uterus is out because they did a hysterectomy, and I know I have a baby girl, so that she could tell them before they could tell her exactly what happened. And she said from that moment, she knew that consciousness was fundamental, that she was not just this physical body. And she had been an atheist ahead of time, but that experience now told her, I'm much more than my 5 senses and the neurons in my brain.
Yeah, amazing experience. So next is Christopher Koch. He is the top neuroscientist in the world. He's German, and he decided to take ayahuasca. If you go to Peru, you can go to the shamans to give you ayahuasca. In chemical terms, it's 5-MeO dimethyltryptamine to give you a psychedelic experience. So his experience can be summed up: I was no longer me, there was no body, there was no space, no time, there was only everything. So let's look at a short excerpt.
We first had to get down to the basics of consciousness.
There's no Turing test for consciousness. The problem of consciousness is not just what most people think, oh, you have to explain how anything can be conscious. That is a problem. But then you also have to explain in each case, why is the particular conscious experience the way it is?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Whether I'm on mushroom or angry, these are different experiences, and you have to explain how I can have different experiences.
Yeah. We tend to believe that if a system behaves conscious, it might be conscious. Now, IIT doesn't want to take consciousness at face value.
It's not about behavior. Ultimately, you have to look at the hardware level. You have to look at the level where the rubber meets the road. You actually have to look at one transistor acting on other transistors.
According to IIT, consciousness has to do with the interconnectedness of the hardware of a system, its integrated information. It measures this as phi. Now, what makes the theory widely applicable is that any system, not only brains, has a phi.
Consciousness may be much more widespread than we think.
Yeah.
A single cell bacteria may already feel like something.
Now, where IIT to me becomes really fascinating is that it has no theoretical objections to the idea of a higher form of mind that extends beyond our brains. And a larger consciousness, as you said earlier, would wipe out sort of, if we, the two of us, connect, sort of, and it becomes this new maximum integrated information, it will wipe out our conscious experience.
Correct. Suddenly the complexity, this phi measure of our integrated brain, will exceed that of my brain by itself and of your brain by itself. At that point, what will happen? Hans, gone. Christoph, gone. Instead, there will be this new Ubermind, okay, this new amalgamation of Hans and Christoph that'll see out of 4 eyes, that'll have 2 mouths, etc.
Christoph Koch is a brilliant, open-minded scientist. But what made this conversation really stand out for me is that he also knows the moment where art sometimes better describes the depth of human consciousness than science. And as a German, he knows his classics.
To quote from the second act of Tristan und Isolde, selbst dann bin ich die Welt. That's exactly
the title of your new book.
The title of my next book, Then I Am the World. because then I experience the world and me as being identical.
Did you have that experience?
Yes, I did.
All right, so that was Dr. Koch. Now, next I want to show you Dr. Yogi Handlin. There's a new science called biosemiotics, and it invites us to see life through a new lens. Science, communication, and meaning are not human inventions, but are biological realities, so they're everywhere. So I'm going to show you this next little video, and should be self-evident what
Does nature speak to us in a language that we don't fully hear anymore?
Yes.
This video is about biosemiotics, a new way to understand non-human consciousness in nature.
What you saw was the elephants on the coastal zones. They broke free from their shackles and they headed for the hills, and the people followed them.
Before the tsunami, this is, of course, yeah.
Hours before the tsunami. No human and none of our artifacts of measurement knew what was going on, but they knew. Our mind is in the world. Our mind is emergent through the relations we have with all the other beings and all the other strands. Every organism sees a different part of reality.
Yeah, has a different dashboard.
Yeah. And insofar as we can become aware of any other organism, we are sharing some sort of umwelt. There's some overlap. You're killing ways of seeing the world, ways of being in the world. You know, when we destroy olive trees that have been around for 1,000 years, we don't know what relations those olive trees were holding up on an ecological level, but also on a semiotic one. When we are scrolling through our black mirrors, you know, looking for that dopamine release, what we're actually craving is to be nestled in the branches or the roots of a tree. In Japan, they have Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, where doctors prescribe for various illnesses, go be in a forest, lie down, breathe, be there for an hour, feel all your emotions.
We need to feel again, you said.
That's the only way that we will survive.
So that's a really interesting notion. So from personal experience, you can really communicate with plants, particularly trees. And because trees don't have a brain, you really enter that field of non-brain consciousness, and it's very healing. In Australia, a lot of us live at the coast, and we love the ocean. The ocean is a huge piece of consciousness that doesn't have a brain, and therefore a lot of people find it cleansing. And when I first came to Australia in 1988, everyone says, yeah, you don't have to sleep, you just have a dive in the ocean in the morning, and you'll be right. I'm not sure that works for everyone, but basically that was the message that was given to me. All right, so sapient, that word, actually relates to wisdom. Have you heard of the Homo sapiens? That's certainly, yeah, we're wise people. We go from cavemen to wise people. So sapient means the cosmos is wise towards the scientific spirituality. So is the universe itself consciousness and it's learning? So is your job as a human being on planet Earth just to experience and to enrich the entire universe so it can learn about the almost endless possibilities that are available in its original consciousness. So let's have a look at James.
Your brain channels consciousness, it doesn't produce it. The cosmos becomes sapient. From a computational perspective, super simple rules kind of suddenly give rise to very complex behavior. The cosmos appears to be assembling very complex contraptions like our brains, which are then able to channel the base consciousness. It's a participatory universe. So the participation is consciousness. Wave function collapse, and you have an observation here, and then the probabilities become something. What happens in between, there's nothing, that's like metaphysical no man's land. You have two metaphysical choices. Either it's like this cosmic nihilism, it's random, has no purpose, shut up, die, whatever, nothing's going to happen. Or you have these dogmatic, static religions which tell you exactly, very detailed, what is what and how it works. So I find these are both disillusion. I think a modern version of idealism is what we need, a scientific spirituality. So it's scientific, it means you're dealing with consensus reality and you're not like denying it. And spirituality being that you are kind of open to working with your own consciousness. Everything can be decoded and has a meaning. And I believe the Western mind has totally forgotten about kind of this symbolic way of cognition.
It's almost to me as if the universe grants us mathematical physics as a sort of to comfort us, to give us a tiny bit of control. But then the moment you go in, then you're just...
Okay, yes, it is the last top scientist before we're going to wrap this up. So his name is Donald Hoffman. He has his own way of looking at things, and he's a cognitive scientist. And the way he puts it, that once you're in a body, you have a brain, and it's like wearing a virtual reality headset. So let's have a look at Donald, and here he is.
And the real world.
Were you happy with the movie The Matrix, what it did sort of culturally with that metaphor?
The Matrix really does open people's minds up to the possibility that what they're experiencing is just a simulation, right? Now, in the Matrix, though, once you pop out of the simulation, it's another space-time world. So when Neo takes off the headset, he's back in a space-time world.
Welcome to the real world.
So it's Trinity and everybody, they're all in a space-time world. So this, what I'm saying, is even more radical, that whatever is beyond space-time is utterly unlike space and time.
But this is like fundamental stuff, right? This is the real cool stuff. We're still thinking of traveling in space-time, and we have all these space-time fantasies, right? And
most of the galaxies that we can see, we could never go to. Space is expanding so quickly that we could never get to them through space, moving at the speed of light. So there's all this real estate out there that we can see that's waving at us and saying, nanny, nanny, you can never get here. Well, that's if you go through space-time. But if space-time is just a headset, think about the options that come. You don't have to go through space-time, you could go around space-time. When we let go of the physicalist framework and we say, no, I am consciousness, I transcend this. Death is just stepping out of this headset. In other words, we're wired up to take the headset seriously, and so consciousness sort of wired itself up to take the headset seriously. But part of the waking up process is to step back and go, oh wow, okay, oh no, I'm not a little thing inside the headset is inside of me. I'm eventually going to take the headset off, so I can have a looser relationship with all this stuff. I don't need to get that big house to be something. I don't need to have that big scientific paper. I don't need to be acknowledged.
All right, so that's Donald. I can tell you've spoken with so many people that were in a near-death experience, that went through the universe, could go anywhere they wanted, could see all of the galaxies in the universe, not a problem. In an instant, wherever they wanted to be, that's where they were. But you have to take the headset off, which is not something that you consciously can do, but it happens. So to wrap this up, Beyond the Veil, an invitation to awaken, because originally it is called the Awakening Conference. So the message that I intended to give to you is you are not a bystander in a mechanical universe. You're actually an agent. You're a conscious agent with a living, intelligent field of awareness. And it's not about believing, it's about experiencing. And it's direct, it's grounded, it's transformative. You don't have to take psychedelic drugs or anything like that. It is your experience. So what happens when you take off the headset of conditioned perception? What if your illness, your longing, your questions are not problems but portals? There is a plethora and high number of people in a near-death experience that felt they sat down on a table and determined all of the major events that they wanted to experience in their life, including their cancer, including losing their daughter or their son or their husband. Yeah, so it wasn't fate, it was deliberately, intentionally asked for to experience that. So what if all of that is just not information, but an activation of something ancient and essential in you, your true self? So what I try to illustrate to you, the two levels of consciousness, and you have therefore two guides. One is your emotional, analytical perception of mind. And it basically is like, I feel hungry, now where do I find food? In the fridge, in the shop, whatever. You go and do it and you experience that. So it's usually called the ego. Well, it's very helpful to navigate for all the basic stuff through space and time. But it's also very unstable. So happiness is here today, it's gone tomorrow. I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you, I hate you, I love you. You know the old flower thing? It's like that. She loves me not. All of your perceptions are always illusionary, so you never can ever see the truth with your brain. It's full of contradictions, conflict, fragmentations, specialness and confusion. Because on the other side, everyone is whole, so everyone is created as the creator. So you can think you're special, but it's a bit of a joke you have on yourself, because everyone is exactly the same. It's holistic. So at best we have faith, belief, and a conceptual understanding. I think I understand it, but at the other side, it's about knowing. You always hear people say in the death experience, I knew everything, I knew myself, I knew this, I knew that. It's like your name. 10 years ago, it was the same, it's the same now. In 10 years, it's the same. It's stable, it doesn't change unless you really want to. Maybe a bad analogy, but I hope you get the idea. On the other side, you're eternal. Doesn't mean like you can feel a trillion, zillion years all at once. It means like you're never changing, so you're eternal. You're always that, which is what is living in now is. It doesn't mean like, oh, it's 208, that's the now. No, the now means like there's no linear time. There's always only just me in the moment. There's no link of memory to the past. There's no link of memory to the future. There's only ever the moment. In the Course in Miracles, for example, there's a lesson that says, planning for the future is an attack on God. You basically go back in your analytical mind and you're not in the moment. Okay. Here's a list of some well-known near-death experiences. It's not comprehensive, but probably going back in time, Dante Alighieri, who wrote the poem Commedia, he introduced the terms Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, which we still use as you go to heaven, paradise, or some people are called in purgatory, and others are even worse off, they're in the Inferno. Ramana Maharshi, you know, he is a famous sage in Tamil Nadu in India. He just enacted death. He said, what would it feel like to be death? And within a second, he was enlightened and he was awake. Whereas some people who try to make this happen, they meditate to do yoga for 40 years and still don't have that experience, which just comes to show that there's no method to shift you into that awareness. The least you do it, the more likely it is. I've also created a course based on Jungian psychology, where you can actually undo a lot of this stuff and put a crack into your brain-related consciousness, and as soon as a crack, you will experience the light of you, how you truly are. But that's a session tomorrow. But Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control you, and you think it's fate. So even as you're listening to me now, you use probably about 20% of your brain activity, and at the background there's 80% of your brain doing all sorts of other stuff that you're not aware of, but that's happening. Right? Okay, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, don't know if anyone knows if someone was tumor cancer or not, but she introduced the idea of the 5 stages of grief. She also had a near-death experiences and was shown this entire process. Dr. Raymond Moody, he's a psychiatrist from the United States of America. He did the same thing. He imagined what it would be like to be death. The ambulance came, it was rushed to hospital, all that kind of stuff, and he then coined it the near-death experience. So it's essential that it is an experience. It's not some teaching of truth. It doesn't advocate a belief. It just says it's an experience and it's happening with my brain being dead or imagined dead. Anita Moorjani, she wrote a best-selling book. She was in ICU. Everyone had given up. She's going to die, but just keep her alive. The family can say goodbye. And basically, she decided to come back, completely healed. The death sentence gone. she wanted to experience more things on planet Earth, and she's still alive. You can look up her Facebook page, and she has a website. But particularly a book, if you really want to look into an in-depth account of what happened and what decisions were made, I would highly recommend her. Then some research. There's heaps of research being done. In 2005, Pereira et al., through the Roy Morgan Cadbury survey, was done here in Sydney. The conclusion was made that 8% of the population, which accounts to more than 2 million Australians, had experienced a near-death experience. So it's not rare, it's not mystical, it happens to a lot of people. Cherry Sutherland, it is published in 1992. She's an Australian at university, researched people that had near-death experiences. So she concluded that the experiences no longer have a fear of death, they have a firm belief in an afterlife, and they report a noticeable increase in psychic sensitivities. They also become highly dedicated to spiritual growth. They start their own non-profit organizations, do charitable organizations, all that kind of stuff. Now, interesting to mention, there's 2 people who have done prospective research. So if you're not a researcher, you can be retrospective, so you try to find data that happened in the past and then come to conclusions. But prospective means you set up the entire experiment so it can be done with all the rules to make research valid and acceptable. And Penny is from the UK. She's an ICU nurse. She did her PhD through it. And she proved that people had near-death experiences in the ICU room. You know, and they could tell it. She would put like a teddy bear or an apple at a really, hidden place in the ICU room, and they could exactly, no, there's an apple in that corner, and there's a teddy bear there, and you put a fake bird outside on the hospital roof. What else do you want to know? So she's researched that and published that. And then Dr. Pin from Lommel is a cardiologist, and his patients started telling stories that were near-death experiences. So over 20 years, he set up prospective research according to all the rules, recorded all this, and a very clear evidential conclusion: near-death experiences are real. Dr. Bruce Grayson, he was recently interviewed by Oprah Winfrey. It was an hour and 40 interview. I've put it on my website. You can find it on YouTube as well. And he started what's called the International Association for Near-Death Studies. So you can go to that particular website and you can find tons and tons and tons, years and years and years of publications. They do it every 3 months. And the other one I would like to mention is the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, which is done by 2 people in the legal field in Texas of the United States of America. They have over 4,000 near-death experience accounts listed on their website that you can access and read. So I'm just trying to give you this idea, like, it is not rare. People are often just afraid to talk about it. So this is one thing where I started the near-death experience network in Australia, so people would actually start talking to each other. I also am busy to start lobbying with the Human Rights Department here in Australia and up for the world, that we get an extra human right, is that people who have paranormal experiences should be protected and cannot be put in mental institutions because this is really happening to them, and we should applaud them and actually learn from them. So what you usually see, there's this extreme need to talk about a near-death experience because suddenly you have experienced all this love like we had in the first video, and you want to tell everyone. At the other side, people were a bit angry and sad. They were told to go back, and they didn't want to go back. It was wonderful. At the other side, I have to go back to my mediocre existence, maybe. So the near-death experiences, everything life on Earth can be seen now as dull and boring because you have that contrast that people who hadn't had that experience don't. Feeling rejected if people didn't have the experience and you talk about it and they sort of look at you, and then behind your back they really dish you. Afraid to be declared mad, I think that makes sense now. An incapacity to put a near-death experience in words. So that first fellow that I showed you, he said, like, yeah, telling it all in sequence, but it actually was all happening at the same time. And I know for myself, all time goes on all the time. So notice a lot of past life experience talk, but that's still thinking with your brain that things happen linearly. If you, for example, want to look at the predictions of Nostradamus, so he was seeing things in 1500 or whenever he was around that were happening in 1900 and in 2000. Because it's all happening parallel rather than as a linear thing in time. So when you're out, all time's going on all the time. Since our experiences are all illusionary, it also means you can change them. If they were written in stone, that's it. But if they're illusionary, you can go back and have a look at it and think again. Okay. No unconditional love experience from earthly relationships, and not knowing to do with their psychic qualities. So all of a sudden you find yourself talking to trees. Well, what do you do with that? Well, if you have plants, you can do need to repot you. Would you like some extra nutrients? You can do that kind of thing, but a lot of people struggling with that. So I've got 3 minutes. Connecting with your authentic self. So this is what I want to talk about tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And the focus is on you, self-awareness. How do you make your unconscious material conscious? Otherwise it will control you and you will go with fate. Possibilities. If you reframe your challenges as opportunities for growth and adopt a mindset for healing and happiness, then suddenly you come into a transformed active of your mind. Basically means an undoing. You become self-aware. Hey, I had this belief. I can't remember where that came from, but I certainly, by becoming self-aware, see that it's there. I can now say, thank you, mind, but please, I don't need it anymore. No more. And actually it will fall away because your mind actually is a master-slave relationship. It listens to you, but you have to tell it clearly. So that's what I want to focus on, and transformation, and see transformation as an undoing of all the stuff that's inside of your mind that you no longer want. Now the thing is, it doesn't go anywhere. So even if your body dies, all of that stuff is still in your mind. It's consciousness. The universe doesn't waste. It also doesn't make a decision was right or wrong. It's all consciousness. Thoughts are thoughts. It doesn't think discriminatory like you and I may do, but it's things we experience. So you have to stand in that idea of like, I'm all powerful, I'm a conscious agent, and I have to now clean up all the stuff that I don't want and keep the stuff that I do want. So it's almost looking back on a photo album and going like, oh no, throw those photos away. Oh, they are really good memories. I like to keep that. I hope it makes sense, may not. All right, on there is a QR code. It'll take you to my website where you can find all the free stuff. Around the corner, in the B1 slot, I've also put a poster there, so you can scan that as well. I will go there after this session and you can ask me all the questions that you want. I'll hang there for a few hours till there's no one left anymore with questions, and then I'll be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. All right, so thank you very much for staying the whole session. I really appreciate it. Thank you.